So in order to do that, we've put in a couple of different changes and some operational adjustments in order for us to be able to do that and to return to school on the 16th. And so I'm going to walk through a couple of those at the moment, and then we're going to open things up on the chat board for additional questions. So I am seeing that it looks like we've hit our Zoom max, and I appreciate people referencing that. And I appreciate the number of people who have jumped on. We are recording, so I am going to record this so that we can share it out with everybody, and everyone will then have the opportunity to participate. So I'm just going to start kind of in alphabetical order, the same way that we released the plan, and starting with our appearance code. We have simplified our appearance code for this year. This is something that we had intended to do even prior to even prior to the pandemic. I'm somebody who really believes in the simplification of things. And so we wanted to simplify our appearance code. And in a traditional year, we would allow our students to be just in a button-up shirt without a tie, and have a more casual shoe choice. So if it's a solid color, more athletic style shoe, we are allowing students to wear those. While we're in phase 1 of our plan, we're also going to allow students to wear polo shirts, St. Ed's branded polo shirts on a daily basis. And those polo shirts are available. If your son doesn't have a polo shirt, those polo shirts are available in our bookstore at a wide range of prices, starting at as low as $20. So we will, we're trying to simplify our appearance code as much as possible so that students can be as comfortable as possible as they return. Arrival to school. In terms of arrival to school, our doors will open every day at 7 a.m. That's a little later than typical. In the past, we've opened at 6:30, but our doors will open at 7 a.m. every day so that we can man our temperature stations. The temperature stations are situated at the new Commons entrance. The Commons is the new building at the south end of the school, the southeast end of the school. Or students may enter at the rear of the school through the Kale Center, where we also have a thermographic temperature scanner. Students will walk through the scanner. They don't actually have to stop. The technology that we have in place for temperature scanning is pretty high end. So they'll kind of go through a corralled area where their temperature will be scanned, and that will be monitored by someone. If a student does register a temperature that's over 100.0 degrees Fahrenheit, he will be pulled aside and we will take his temperature again. If it registers again, the nurse would follow up and the student would be sent home to either have a day off for illness or to learn remotely from home until those symptoms subside. Regarding attendance, attendance will operate very similar to the ways it has in the past. If your son is sick and will not be learning with us that day, you would contact the attendance office and they would register him as having a day out of school that day as an absence. However, if your son is going to stay home and learn remotely, you won't have to call in. Your son would be marked as present when he logs into his first class for the morning. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the presentation. But when he logs into that first class, he will be essentially marked as present, and he'll obviously have to be present for all of the classes for the remainder of that day. In terms of backpacks and lockers, we are going to allow students to carry one normal size backpack this year, and something for their lunches as well. So if they have a lunch bag and they're bringing their lunch, they can carry that with them as well. We are not allowing the use of lockers in phase 1. The reason that we're not using lockers while we're in phase 1 is we want to clear more space in our hallways in order for students to be able to pass more freely in the halls. So not having those lockers being used during exchange of class will keep our hallways more open. If your son is a student athlete and he's participating in a fall sport, our athletic department right now is working through a plan for how where they will leave their equipment and athletic gear when they arrive in the morning, and how they will safely change after school to be prepared for their athletic activities. And we anticipate the finalization of that plan by the end of next week. So as students return to school, they'll have a place where they're able to safely store their gear and then prepare for any activities that are after school. In terms of books and supplies, right now we're going through the process of purchasing books and supplies in our Green and Gold Shop bookstore. And so our upperclassmen should be using this week. I sent an email out on Monday of this week with additional details on that. But we are hoping that all of our students come through this week so that we don't have a rush on the bookstore next week when orientations are happening. We've generally been pretty flexible about that in the past, but for our sophomores, juniors, and seniors, we do want you to make sure you come up to school this week and purchase all of your books and supplies. For that, you'll enter through the Commons, you'll get a temperature check. Someone at the reception desk will ensure that you have all of your final forms completed, and then you'll be given a schedule to advance to the bookstore to get any books and supplies. If you're the parent of an incoming freshman, freshmen will go through that process as part of their orientation days, so they don't need to worry about doing that in the next couple of days. That's built into their orientation. In terms of clinic policies, obviously we want to be very careful about students coming to school sick, and then once they are sick, their return to school. And I won't go through all of that right now because it's a pretty detailed process, but I would recommend that everyone goes back to the email that was sent last week with the operational details and read through the protocols for return to school and what symptoms will require a clearance from a doctor in order to return. Obviously, in order to keep everyone as safe as possible, we want, if your son, or if you or your son are experiencing any symptoms, we would prefer that you stay home. Even if it's a mild symptom, you do have the opportunity to learn from home on a day-to-day basis. And so we want you to take advantage of that and not run the risk of potentially infecting your classmates or teachers because you're coming to school with a couple of those symptoms. From a daily symptom check perspective, and this is a place where we're really relying on parents and students to be faithful to the process. We will obviously check everyone's temperature upon arrival, but on a daily basis, as you're preparing to come to school, we would ask that you go through almost a checklist of symptoms to ensure that you're safe to come to school. So if you have a cough, a sore throat, shortness of breath, vomiting or diarrhea, loss of taste or smell, chills, nausea, body aches, or a runny nose, and certainly a temperature that's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, we would ask that you stay home from school and contact your physician so that they can help determine the next steps in terms of whether or not you need to come see the doctor, whether you need to be tested for coronavirus, and when you could safely return to school without infecting the rest of the community. In terms of departure from school, this is a little bit of a change from where we've been in years past. When students depart from school, we've generally been pretty generous about students being on our campus and really until the last activity ends or until they're available to be picked up. We are asking for cooperation with students and parents just to limit the number of students who are on campus after school. If you don't have an after-school activity that you need to be participating in that's supervised by an adult, we would like you to leave campus and head home for the day versus hanging out on campus. The academic side of the building, the main part of the building will close by 5 p.m. each day so that our facility staff can do the proper sanitization. of that part of the building. The other areas of the building will close immediately after the last activity. So if your son is an athlete and he's participating in an athletic practice after school, we would ask that he leaves campus immediately following the end of that athletic practice. If your son is involved in a performing arts activity, the same would go. As soon as that performing arts activity ends, we would ask that your son leave campus. Also, in terms of leaving school, we are going to make an adjustment this year that if your son has a last period study hall, we will allow him to leave school at that last period study hall. So that would be 2 p.m. Now, if he's going to be returning to campus, he needs to go to study hall. But if he's heading home, he can leave school at 2 p.m. and that will just help us clear the campus in a little bit more of a staggered fashion. And again, that's for all levels. That was generally a privilege that was left for seniors, but we're going to allow that at all levels this year. This is a quick and easy one. We've always had students who are having food delivered to campus, and we've generally been pretty flexible about that, but because we do not want any visitors on our campus and we want to limit the number of people on our campus as best we can, we will not allow any food deliveries on campus this year. In terms of learning from home, and I'll spend a couple minutes on this because it's going to be a big topic. Learning from home is going to be an important part of our safe return to school plan. Some students, you may be in a position right now where you're feeling that you're more comfortable learning from home. You're not necessarily ready to venture into a full 5 days a week, full school day, and we certainly understand that. We want to support that, and you're very welcome to learn from home. Some students, as we return to school, may also be in a position where they're having some symptoms or they've been exposed to someone who has a confirmed case of the coronavirus. We would ask that those students are learning from home and that you make us aware of that so that we can offer very specific instruction about when your son can return. And again, we will accommodate your son as he's learning from home, but we want to be very, very careful and cautious about limiting as much spread as we possibly can. When a student learns from home, he's going to have to follow some very specific parameters. He's going to have to access each of his classes from a designated Google Hangout link. Those Google Hangout links will be shared on each of his individual teachers' PowerSchool pages. And so, you know, let's say it's a typical day. It's a day like today. It's a Wednesday, and I'm learning from home. And my first class of the day is chemistry at 8 a.m. I need to be logged into that chemistry class at 8 a.m. because the teacher's going to take attendance and is going to count me learning from home as part of the attendance. Students must follow the daily bell schedule for in-person learning and log into each class on time. So we have 5 minutes in between classes and a 40-minute lunch period. A student learning from home is going to follow that same schedule synchronously and will need to log into every class on time. When students log in, as I mentioned, they'll be counted as present remote, and they'll be engaging in the class in the same way that they would be if they were in person, and their teachers will be engaging with them in the same way that they would be if they're in person. Students will be asked when they're learning remotely to dress in the designated appearance code for that day. And we want students dressed in appearance code for a variety of reasons. One, we think it's important for them to go through the process of readying themselves for school and readying themselves for learning. Secondly, we learned over the course of the spring that students would come to their Google Classroom meetings, their Google Hangouts, in various stages of dress, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. So, you know, we're simplifying this by saying students just need to be in the dress code for the day, and that helps keep things simple for everyone. And then we need to be responsible, students will need to be responsible for all assignments, both in class and for homework. So they'll be operating very much like they would be if they were present. All students would be subject to all of our cultural expectations for all of our students. So just like a student could receive a culture card while he's in class, he could also receive a culture card if he's not engaging in the way that is appropriate while he's learning remotely, and the follow-through would be the same on that as well. If you are a family that is intending to begin the year remotely, we want to have a brief orientation for you, and that orientation will be next Wednesday at 4 p.m. There is a link to a form that was in our operational plan that was shared last week, and we would ask that you complete that link so we can send you specific details for that orientation. In terms of masks, masks are going to be required for all students, all faculty and staff at all times. And it's very important. The mask policy that we have in place is obviously now an order from the governor. And so we've received some support for that, but we know that masks are critical in terms of slowing the spread of the coronavirus. And we will be very, very diligent regarding every student, every faculty, and every staff member and their wearing of masks and the proper wearing of masks. It's really important that masks are worn over both the nose and the mouth, that they securely cover the chin so that they are serving their most safe purpose. Masks must be a solid color or St. Ed's branded. Again, this is just about simplifying policies. We do not want to be the judge of what is an appropriate mask or what may not be an appropriate mask. And so to simplify that, we're asking that all masks be a solid color, or they can be a St. Ed's branded mask. And the type of mask is really important. So you can't have a mask that is a cut shirt sleeve or a bandana. We want manufactured masks that securely fit around the nose, the mouth, and the chin. And neck gaiters will also not be permitted. So there's a lot of research coming out recently, especially in the last couple of weeks, about the safety of neck gaiters. And so our perspective is changing on that as the research changes on that. And so neck gaiters will not be permitted as an appropriate mask. For students who are able to provide a doctor's note outlining a medical reason for being unable to wear a mask, that student will be able to wear a face shield, but it will have to be a formalized doctor's note that says that that student, for a medical reason, is unable to wear a mask. Students will be given mask breaks when they're outside and spaced at least 6 feet apart. So we know that students do need to take a break from the mask every once in a while. We are encouraging our teachers to try to push students outside as much as possible, outside during lunch, outside during classes when it fits for the class and it's appropriate. And when students are appropriately spaced, science tells us that they can safely remove their masks until they need to put that mask on again, because they're going to be within a 6-foot proximity of somebody inside. We will be very strict with our mask policy. Again, masks are about keeping other people safe, and we really truly see it as an act of servant leadership, wearing a mask so that you can protect others in our community. So when a student doesn't comply or is unwilling to comply with the mask policy, our response is simply going to be to send that student home to learn remotely, or until that student is prepared to comply with the mask policy. So that the masking is very, very important to us. Orientations for students as we begin the year. So there's the remote learning orientation. And as I mentioned, that will be Wednesday, September 9th at 4 p.m. And again, I'll reiterate this. If you're intending to begin the year remotely, we are asking that you fill out that form online so we can send you a specific communication about that orientation. Orientations for students who will be learning in a traditional manner will start next Wednesday, September 9th as well. Those are full day orientations. The seniors, class of 2021, will start Wednesday, September 9th. Juniors will be Thursday, September 10th. Sophomores, Friday, September 11th. And freshmen will have the traditional 2-day orientation on Monday, September 14th and Tuesday, September 15th. Again, those orientations are 8 to 3, and we'll use those orientations really to orient all of our students to just the different changes in policy that are in place, and make sure that everyone's on the same page so that we can have the smoothest start to the year on Wednesday, September 16th. Power School and class schedules. We have gone through the process of transitioning our student information system to Power School. So for our upperclassmen, you're familiar with Power School as part of your learning management system, where teachers would house resources and maybe some assessments for your classes. But you're used to in the past going to FA Web to see your grades, absenteeism schedules, things along those lines. All of those have been merged into one Power School system called the Power School Unified Classroom. That was a pretty significant undertaking that will lead to, frankly, a much better constituent experience for both our parents, our students, and our faculty and staff. And so logging into your Power School, both from a student perspective, and students would use their traditional Google login through their St. Ed's email to log into Power School. And parents, you've been provided with a step-by-step video instructions through that operational plan to walk through setting up your Power School page so that you can access your son's grades on a daily basis. You can access his learning management system and understand what he's doing in each class. And you'll also be able to see his attendance records as well. So I would highly recommend, if you have not done that yet as a parent, to watch. It's a short video. It's less than 5 minutes. It will walk you through step by step how you log into your Power School page and how you actually manage your son's classes and understand his grades through Power School. Purchasing lunch. Lunch is one area that will have a very significant modification as we're in phase 1. We are very fortunate to have the brand new David and Marilyn Pallison Commons, and our students will be able to enjoy that large space for years to come. While we're in phase 1 of our plan, though, we need to be pretty controlled about how we manage lunch. And part of that control is coming through AVI, which is our food service provider. And so boxed lunches will be available on a daily basis as for students who'd like to purchase lunch. Students are also welcome to bring their lunch, but their purchase, if they plan to purchase lunch, they will only have the option of one boxed lunch per day. It would be a specific sandwich choice with chips, cookies, a bottle of water, and a piece of fruit. Matt Wallenhorst, who oversees student life, will send an email on Fridays to all of our students asking them if they intend to buy lunch any day the following week. And that will help us get a somewhat accurate count of how many box lunches are needed. And then box lunches will be sold in a variety of locations around the campus to allow for appropriate distancing while students need to go buy lunch. So again, a student can bring his lunch at any point. I would recommend while we're in phase 1, if a student is bringing lunch, that it's something that doesn't need to be microwaved. Students won't have access to microwaves as readily as they have in years past while we're in phase 1. And as we transition to relatively normal lunch down the line, we will be able to one, provide a wider variety of lunch options for sale in the new Commons, and also provide access back to the microwaves for students. Our restroom policy has changed slightly, only in that we do not want students bringing their phones into the restrooms. They just really become harbingers for germs. And so when a student asks to go to the restroom in a class, the teacher will either ask him to leave his phone on his desk or place a phone in a basket on the teacher's desk. And then the student can go use the restroom and then come back and grab his phone when he returns. And again, the heart of that policy is just trying to prevent as much germ spread as we possibly can. And we know that when a student brings his phone into a restroom, it just drives the spread of germs. And so we want to avoid that through a pretty simple policy. In terms of textbook return, a number of our upperclassmen may have textbooks from last year that need to be returned. And there's really not a perfect way to do this. But if you or your son has a textbook from last year that needs to be returned to St. Ed's, we're asking him to bring that on the first regular day of school, September 16th, and he would return that book to the department that it came from. It won't necessarily be the teacher, it'll be the department. So for instance, if your son had Mr. McPartland last year for English and he has a textbook for Mr. McPartland, and he has Miss Denstead this year for English, on the first day of school, he would just return that book to Miss Denstead, and we'll make sure that those books all get into the appropriate place. So we're trying to make that as simple as we possibly can. Traffic flow. Traffic flow on our campus will be a little bit different this year than last year in that we're returning to normal. St. Ed's, over the course of the past 5 years, has really been under construction with a number of construction projects. And we've been grateful for everybody's patience as the traffic patterns have changed on campus. We've returned now to a normalized traffic pattern, which is students are able to be dropped off of Detroit in the front. And the traffic will flow there where a car can pull up, the student will exit to be able to enter the commons, and cars will kind of move in a circular motion. In the rear, last year, everything was one way. Traffic in the rear of the school has returned to 2 ways. So it's really important that everyone's aware about that. So there's not a safety issue. We do ask that people move through the rear of the school cautiously. When you're dropping off, students will not be able to enter through the athletics entrance because there's no temperature scanner there. So if you drop off in the rear of the school, students will have to enter through the Kale Center so that they can have their temperature scanned. And then there will be a variety of routes if they do have athletic equipment where they'll be able to move so that they can drop that equipment off for the day. And then lastly, our AAA raffle. We've had a AAA raffle at St. Ed's going back almost 30 years. That raffle has supported all of the great academics, arts, and athletic programming that we do. That raffle will operate in kind of a fully digital capacity. All tickets will be available online this year. And Mo Lesh, who's worked at St. Ed's for a number of years, does a phenomenal job organizing the raffle and getting students excited and engaged in the raffle process, because ultimately the funds raised from that raffle support all of the things that our students enjoy doing most in their academic, athletic, and arts-related extracurricular activities. So that raffle will launch October 8th. You'll receive a lot more information about that, but all of that will be paperless this year. All of it will move online. So as we wrap up and go into the Q&A session, I just want to share with you some thoughts that I shared with our faculty and staff earlier this week as we came back for our back to school days and specifically our retreat. And it was kind of 5 pieces of advice that I think are really important for everyone as we navigate these new waters and come back to school in a pretty unique time in the history of the world and obviously in the history of our school. So the first of those is take care of yourself. And I think it's really, really important that we all consider that we need to take care of ourselves, whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually. This is a challenging time for everybody, and we need to prioritize our own physical health and our own mental health so that we can be who we need to be for one another. Number two is keep it simple. This is a pretty complex challenge that we have in place right now, and the world is facing right now. The return to school and everything that the world is dealing with is a pretty complex situation. But a complex challenge doesn't necessarily call for a complex solution. There can be simple solutions for us to do this safely, and we want to make things as simple as we possibly can. And the heart of our return to school plan was to keep things as simple as possible for our faculty and staff, to keep things as simple as possible for our parents, and to keep things as simple as possible for our students. And it's important to keep that in mind and that we be generous with one another around that. Number three is extend grace and expect grace in return. So we all come to this situation with different challenges, with different anxieties, different things happening in our homes and in our personal lives. And it's important that we remember that, and that we extend grace to others, and that we expect the extension of grace in return. And so when we talk about our teachers, you know, our teachers are managing a wide variety of situations as they come back to school, including the schooling of their own children. And you know, you as students or you as parents are dealing with a wide variety of situations. If you have students who are in different schools, all of those plans probably look differently. And so we need to really extend grace to one another and be patient and understanding with one another, because we are truly all in this together. The fourth is have fun. Like, it's okay to still fully enjoy the school experience. And we are in a time in the world where it's easy to feel a lot of despair. And sometimes it's easy to ask yourself the question of, like, am I allowed to have fun? Am I allowed to enjoy this experience while there's so much challenge happening in the world? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. Like, we want, you know, St. Ed's is a hospitable community. It's a place where students should enjoy being. It's a place where you as parents should enjoy being part of the community. And so I gave this advice to our teachers. We want people having fun and enjoying their experience on our campus. It'll look a little bit different, but it's okay to act in that way and not look at every situation through a lens of hopelessness or despair, because that's certainly not the case. And that transitions to the last point, number 5, which is, you know, our Holy Cross heritage and our commitment in our patron and Brother Andre Bassett tells us that our responsibility is to bring hope to others. And we have the opportunity to do that as we return to school. You know, our teachers, our faculty and staff have the opportunity to bring hope to you as parents and students with a safe return to school. You all have the opportunity to bring hope to one another and to this community, because we want to be together as a community, and we all need to contribute to that, and we can all bring hope to each other. And it's really important to keep that in mind, that approach to hope is very, very important. So it's about 4:35 now, and I appreciate that everybody has been posting questions and comments in the chat bar. We are going to transition now to the Q&A session. Matt Wallenhorst, who I mentioned before, who oversees student life and leadership here, he is going to essentially MC the Q&A portion. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and Matt and I will kind of operate this as a discussion with each other in the chat. So Matt, you can take it away with the first questions.
You have to unmute me.
Thank
you. Just go ahead and ask from here.
Welcome, everyone. I'll get right into it. Unmuted.
There we go. Sorry. Welcome, everyone. I'll get right into it. The first question that came through was, someone's son was at the bookstore today and only sizes available were extra large and small. Will there be additional polos coming in before school?
You're gonna.
Gotcha.
So mute again.
Yeah.
So absolutely, there will be more polos coming in. We just ordered another big run of polos today. We expect those to be in on Friday, and they have to be embroidered, and that'll take about a day or so. So I would suspect by the end of next week we will have more polos in. And again, students can wear any St. Ed's polo that they've received either in years past or for any activity that they've done in years past. We do have other polos available in the bookstore as well. The $20 polos, there was a pretty significant run on those. And like I said, we did place an order today for those.
You got to unmute me every time.
Don't just ask me the question.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Next question. Certainly, I understand that the virus will dictate the overall plan. However, is there an expectation or frequency plan for reevaluation of this plan and adjustments as needed, more along the lines of easing the restrictions?
Yeah, so that is a phenomenal question, and you know, a question around easing restrictions and ultimately the phases, you know, we almost look at things on a day-to-day basis, and look at how we can ensure our students are getting the full extent of their experience on a day-to-day basis. And we will be constantly evaluating our plan. You know, the plan right now on paper is our best thoughts and planning. But frankly, there haven't been any students in our building. So it's not a plan that's easily able to test. And as students come back to school, we will be adjusting our plans to ensure that we're meeting all of our goals. And as the public health situation changes, either as it improves or, you know, we hope this doesn't happen, but if it regresses in any way, we'll have to make adjustments to the plan based on a response to the public health situation.
If there is a large gap between the end of school and the start of athletics, would students be able to stay in the building?
So if there's a large gap between the end of school, the end of school, so 3 o'clock and athletic contact or an athletic practice, yeah, we would manage that specifically with those particular teams. The biggest factor for us is we need to make sure that all of those students are supervised so that they are operating as safely as possible on our campus. And so it's really important that that supervision is in place. But generally, soccer practices a little later than football. And we're working with our athletic department right now to ensure that if a student needs to stay on campus, that they're supervised on campus and they're able to be on campus safely.
Can a mask be used that is not bought from St. Ed's but incorporates the logo? In other words, if it's made elsewhere? Yeah, so as long as it is what I would deem a manufactured mask, so if it fits appropriately over your nose, mouth, and chin, and if it has the St. Ed's logo on it, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't necessarily have to be purchased from St. Ed's. Is there a, quote, magic number of positive COVID students that will dictate when the school will need to be closed?
Yeah, so that's a phenomenal question. And I will say that we are very, very grateful to our partners at the Cuyahoga County Board of Health, who have frankly been tremendous to not only St. Ed's, but to all schools as we've been navigating this. And we really rely on the health experts at the Department of Health to make any decision in that regard. So anytime there's an exposure or a case in our community, our first call is to the Department of Health, and the Department of Health is ultimately putting forth the guidance to ensure that we're continuing to operate safely. So there isn't necessarily a magic number. That it would be really analyzed on a situation-to-situation basis. And if we can continue to safely have students on our campus, and you'll continue to hear me say this, we want to operate to the full extent we're safely able to. If the situation at St. Ed's specifically got to a point where we could not safely educate students on our campus, and we were made aware of, or we partnered with the Department of Health on that decision, we would have to adjust our plan.
Can students that have first period study hall come in late?
So students who have first period study hall cannot come in late. In the past, we've allowed seniors to be able to do that. We are not going to have that in place for this year. And the reason why is, one, we have to man those temperature stations. And we want to do the manning of those stations and have everybody on campus prior to 8 a.m. We also want to have a very clear sense of our attendance as early as we're possibly able to. And so if we had students coming in late, we wouldn't be able to manage that as well as we'd like to.
Where will orientation be held for students attending school?
So orientation is going to be held in a variety of locations on our campus. All of the upperclassmen orientations will begin with a mass that will be outside on the front lawn so students can be appropriately distanced. We want to ensure that the faith life of the school remains as robust as possible. And so we will start with mass. And then students will experience the orientation in their advisory groups. So they'll be in small groups for the entirety of the orientation experience, and rotating to a number of stations around the campus to really go through their full orientation.
What is the anticipated timing for reevaluation and phase 2?
So there's no set timing right now for when we can move to a phase 2 of our plan. The public health situation will really dictate when a phase 2 could be put into place and what a phase 2 looks like. And so we need to evaluate what students, when we have students on campus, what that looks like, and how we're specifically operating at St. Ed's, and then ultimately make the determination for when we can move to a next phase safely.
Will students still utilize the school lunch pay system, or do they need cash?
So students may still utilize the school lunch system, and the link to set that up and instructions for setting that up was in that operational plan. They also can continue to pay cash as well. And those box lunches will be $6 even. And so you can use your pay school system, or students may bring cash on a daily basis.
Will there be an option for hybrid learning, i.e. 2 days in school and 3 days from home?
So a student may choose on a daily basis whether he feels comfortable, whether he would feel more comfortable learning from home or coming to school in class. The student would still be subject to participating in all of those classes synchronously from a remote perspective, from being fully engaged in all of those classes, and be responsible for all of the in-class work and homework for those classes. Our plan is really set up, frankly, for students who have to stay home. If I'm being perfectly honest, it's not a great setup, because really being on a computer for 7 hours a day is not an ideal situation if you don't have to be in that situation. So if you can feel like you're safely able to be at school, we feel like we're safely able to host you here, and we'd like you to be at school. But there are some students who are just not going to be able to come to school, and so we want to be able to serve them. Or a student may wake up with a fever on a particular day, or with one of the symptoms that we went through earlier in the presentation on a particular day. And it's important that that student stays home for the safety of others. And so that student would be able to learn online. But we want the best for your son, and we will work with each family individually to provide the best. And so if coming in 2 days a week and learning from home 3 days a week is the best fit for your individual situation, we want to be able to support that. But it also may come with some challenges as well. And we could talk on an individual basis about what some of those may be in terms of what the remote learning situation is.
How will tests work for students doing virtual learning?
Yeah, so students who are learning virtually are still subject to any assessment that will happen in the class. And we've spent a lot of time working with our faculty over the course of the summer in terms of how learning has to evolve in order to meet the needs of the current situation. And that means assessment is going to be a little bit different. And so you can expect far fewer multiple choice exams that are strictly content-based, and far more assessments where students are asked to take that content that they've learned, to synthesize that content, and to turn it into something that they're actually creating. And so all students who are learning remotely are still going to be participating in the same assessments that students who are in person will be participating in.
Does a student standing in line outdoors in very cold or very hot weather affect the accuracy of the temperature taking equipment?
So that's a great question. It's not something that we have experienced so far. Obviously, we're seeing it in hot weather right now, and we've been testing it in warmer weather. The system that we have in place for temperature taking is very, very elaborate. It is not the handheld thermal scanners that are just taking surface temperatures that you're seeing in a lot of places. They're very expensive and frankly very technologically advanced systems that are based on all of the systems come with what's called a black box that is warmed exactly at 98.6 degrees. Every temperature scan is relative to that black box, so it always has something that it's calibrating to. And it's actually hitting students right above the bridge of the nose near the eye. That's where it's ultimately the camera is taking the temperature from, which is the most accurate place on the face to take a surface temperature. And so we have not experienced that climate situation impacts what the temperature is.
If you have to pick up a student that has a temperature, where do you pick them up and how long can they stay there?
Yeah, so a student who would come to school with a fever, if they come through the system, they register a temperature, we would pull them aside. They would register, if they register a temperature again, they would be isolated. We've set up the clinic to be an isolation space. So the clinic has really been separated into two spaces so that we do have an isolation space. We would obviously want the student to be picked up as soon as possible, and really for the benefit of the student as well. If someone is sick, they want to go home and rest. And so as quickly as the parent is able to come pick the student up, as we would want to make that happen, but obviously we would accommodate the student as best we can in an isolated space on our campus where he's away from others.
Can students use a solid color mask with a college logo? The example is Sun has a solid black with a black Ohio State O on it.
Yeah, so again, we're trying to oversimplify things, and so we either want them to be solid colored, completely solid, or St. Ed's branded. And the reason for that is, we don't want teachers on a daily basis to have to go through a debate with students of what type of mask is appropriate and what type of mask isn't appropriate. And so for us, the best way to do that is just to have a pretty stringent policy to say it's either got to be solid color or it's got to be St. Ed's branded.
If a student, faculty, or staff member tests positive, who will be notified and how?
Yeah, so if you've been following the information that's been coming out from the governor and from the state of Ohio, this is now being mandated that schools report to their communities when there is a case. For us, the reporting, the best mechanism for reporting will be via email to the community, to the parent community, to students and faculty and staff, making them aware of a case in the community. We obviously cannot reveal who the case is because that would be a HIPAA violation, but we can share that there has been a case in the community, and the state is requiring that we also list on our website cases in our community as well. So they want this to be as transparent as possible. You know, for people who have been in our community for a number of years, you know, I personally believe in as much transparency as possible, and in sharing news as quickly and as transparently as possible. So we at St. Ed's do not want to be in a situation where you as a parent aren't aware of a situation that's happening on our campus. We tend to communicate those as quickly as possible, and that would be the case in this situation as well.
This piggybacks on that. Who would be contact traced and subject to quarantine?
Yeah, so in terms of who would be contact traced and subject to quarantine, that's where we would work in partnership with the Board of Health. The Board of Health has done a phenomenal job, as I mentioned before, in terms of managing these types of situations. And they would help direct the contact tracing, and frankly, they would lead the contact tracing at St. Ed's, and help us make a determination of who ultimately had to be quarantined.
How are mask breaks scheduled throughout the school day?
Yeah, so there's not necessarily a specific schedule for mask breaks. Obviously, when students are eating lunch, they need to be able to take their masks off, and we've set things up for them to be able to do that safely. And so a mask break could happen then. But as I mentioned before, we've encouraged our faculty, when they're able to, and when weather is permitting, we want them to be taking their students outside. And when students are appropriately distanced outside, they'll be able to take their mask off. If a student is struggling particularly, and this happens from time to time, and from depending on the student or the day they're having, and they just need a quick break from the mask, we would ask during class that they just step outside the classroom. They could remove their mask for a few moments, and then go back into the classroom. And you know, we'll manage those situations in the best interest of every student, and maintaining safety in the classroom environment.
With the possibility that all students could be virtually attending school, at least some days, should they all attend virtual orientation?
So that's a good question in terms of attending the virtual orientation. Really, the reason we have that virtual orientation in place is because those students will not be starting school in person, and we want to be able to orient them. We will talk to all the students who are in person for in-person orientation about what those situations would look like.
Will students that are tardy be excused by long and slow temperature scan lines?
So we do not expect that we will have long and slow temperature scan lines. Our students do not have to stop in order to be scanned for a temperature. Again, the system we have in place is pretty elaborate. It can scan 30 individuals a second. And as students will walk through the doors and kind of flow through as they would in a pretty normalized situation. They won't see delays as they're coming through the doors. And so I wouldn't anticipate that the temperature screening is going to create any delays for anyone.
For students on campus, are they attending classes as usual in classroom settings with teachers and other students? Also, in-campus students will be instructed during orientation on how to log into classes should they choose to learn from home on any given day?
Yeah, so students would be attending class as normal with their teachers and classmates as normal. We've set up our classrooms so that students can be appropriately distanced, and they'll obviously be wearing masks as another mitigating factor. And yes, those students, as they're orienting to individual classes, will all have an understanding of how they access where they need to learn remotely.
If your son has an appointment midday, should he begin the day remotely and come in after, or would you still pick them up from and bring them back to campus?
Yeah, so I would operate in as normalized a fashion as possible. So if your son has a doctor's appointment midday, I mean, it's up to you, but he could come to school and then check out and then check back in as would be the case in a typical day. We probably have time. I want to be very cautious about people's time. It's 4:56 now, so we probably have time for about 2 more questions.
If students did need to stay on campus due to transportation issues, how would that be handled?
Yeah, so if there is an extenuating circumstance where a student needs to stay on campus, we will be okay with that. We just don't want to make it a habit that all students are kind of hanging out on campus after school. So students will be able to be in the commons area until they're able to be picked up in an extenuating circumstances for transportation.
Last one. Will students eat lunch in their advisor's classroom, and how will dismissal at the end of the day work? Will classes have to leave the school classroom by classroom?
Yeah, so students will eat in their advisor's classroom, or their advisor may take them to a designated area outside. In terms of dismissal at the end of the day, our dismissal will be pretty typical at the end of the day, where we'll release everybody at one time. All of the hallways have been marked with lanes and with one way. Students won't need to go to their lockers, so they'll be able to file out of any of the exits at that point to leave school. So again, I really appreciate everybody taking the time, and we've recorded this session, and I'm going to share out the recording. I see a question about whether we'll be able to provide answers to all of the Q&A at the end. I will actually make every effort to do that. You can also email me or call me at any time. I'm happy to talk to any family individually about what the plan is. Ultimately, you know, I've said it time and time again, we want to return to school in the most normal but safe fashion that we're able to. And that means different things for different students and different families. And so if you want to have a one-on-one conversation with me about any questions or concerns that you may have, feel free to reach out to me anytime. And I'm always available to talk and make sure that you're comfortable on this return to school. I am very, very confident that St. Ed's is prepared to do this well. And we have an added advantage right now of other schools being in session and learning a lot from other schools. And we're being very deliberate about what we do with what we're learning and how we're using it to impact ultimately what the experience of our students will be. And I am frankly very excited for the school year that's ahead for us. I know that there are a lot of question marks, there are a lot of anxieties, and there will certainly be some challenges ahead. But I also fully believe that we can deliver on the St. Ed's mission, and we will do that this year, and it's going to be a great year. I'm really excited to work with all of you and work with your sons, and we're excited to see them back on campus in the weeks ahead. Hope everybody has a great evening, and we will talk to you soon. Take care.